samples of their writing and everything.
We're all set.
Okay. All right, we're all set. This is the second meeting with the architect, Banuel, of the Facilities Committee. It's October 27th, 2015. Tonight, we're going to talk about a couple of areas. Ingrid and her team have put together a couple of conceptual proposals of options, which we're going to go through tonight. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of the various sites. And after that, Ingrid and her team met with staff, some of the staff at the junior senior high on Friday, and got feedback from, I think, most of the departments as to sort of their vision of needs and wants. And Ingrid sent us some notes on that. We'll discuss that as well. But with that, I'll turn it over.
Okay. Well, this is Chris Solomon from my office. He's been working on the plans that we've been developing. Excuse me. And even though these look, like final plans, these are not. These are just put up there for discussion purposes only. So we've really jumped off and have been digesting all of the information that you guys have been compiling over the last several years, as well as the previous failed bond votes. And we tried to develop some new options since the previous proposals failed. We wanted to see maybe there's another option that is feasible. So as we go through these are just two options tonight. We're learning more and more about your sites. We want to just talk about the site options, pluses and minuses that will help us start narrowing down kind of what options we really want to pursue with you guys. So Chris and I will stand up here and go through this. Just as a general recap of where we are on the Google map here. This is your existing school. South Main Street's here. Carpenter property is here. Town fields. And one point of reference in going again through all of the information, the reports say that this site is 26.1 acres. So I'm assuming they're including the town-owned land. So we need to kind of correct that because we've been under the assumption that the property line is right about here, which is a lot less than the Carpenter land.
How much is the Carpenter land in acreage?
It is 20, I want to say 20 acres. So I'll dig that out, but...
And how much, do we know how much is wetlands, as you talked about before?
Well, that's...
Usable?
Yeah.
We have that marked on the next.
We do, and you have a wetlands survey that we're trying to get on our plans too. So basically, for this existing site, the positives, if you will, are we have an existing building here that you've recently done an elevator addition, and the gym and locker rooms are fairly recent. You have existing parking lots here. Your access to the town fields. You have site utilities that already exist, so electrical, sewer, stormwater, propane, underground tanks. There is apparently a town sewer main, I believe, on the west side, so that's something we'll need to learn more about. You have a beautiful historic facade of a school. I don't know if it's on any historic lists, but it's a beautiful school. And I think the neighbors around you are already used to having a school as a neighbor, which I think is a positive. And there's very limited wetlands. There is a stream that crosses down here, but the site basically is the site with limited wetlands. Some of the negatives of this site are you have limited area, no space for any new fields on this area. The art room now is across the road, so the kids now go out of the school building, cross a road into another building. There was mention that in a major flood or major rainstorm, this does flood in the back part of this parking lot here. But the gym and everything, the floors are above the flood elevation, so you're fine with the building. There's limited areas for additions, but there are areas for additions. And there's really no other space that's available for parking, and more parking is needed. You did do a structural analysis, or I'm not sure an engineer actually did it, but the Harriman report in 2012 has some information on the structure of the building. So that's one thing that we'd like to talk more about tonight, and the next steps. Peter Stephenson's office in doing the elevator project has learned more about your project, but we really want to compile all of the studies that you've done to date, give them to Stephenson or a structural engineer to look at, to see what they would recommend doing to really assess this building, to really see what would be needed for a renovation to happen.
Ingrid, as we go through this, and I know you made some comments on stuff you read before, could we end up with something like, call it a fact sheet, whether people want to disagree with it? That
FAQs.
As we,
Yes.
well, FAQ is
Corrections.
where a lot of the questionable facts sometime came up in the past in some people's, whatever we call it, but
Sure.
just to get, that'd be great.
Yeah, and clarifications, I think. As we learn more, we uncover more things.
Thank you.
So one of the things I want to point out with this, because a lot of people get it backwards, and it's how it's written in this report, is that if this building were to be sold and used by another function, not educationally, by housing, by whatever, then that means this entire structure would need to comply with today's code and need to be upgraded for seismic and all of the other things. If it's a change of use. So the difference is, if it stays a school, you're grandfathered, and we can go under the international existing building code, and there's a exception and a clause in the code, and we talked about this a little bit before, about the 40% rule. So as long as you don't touch more than 40% of the structure, then you don't have to upgrade it.
And that's
So-
the international rule and not the change
International
of
Building
use.
Code.
Okay.
International Building Code. So the way it's written here is there's a few words there, and I would see people not understanding. So if it's a change of use and a different person owns this building and is using it for other than education, then it has to comply with today's code, which is more stringent. That means a full upgrade.
Ingrid, what various aspects, you've already talked about seismic. What other aspects of the code? Is it?
The most expensive one is the seismic code, but basically you'd have to comply with all of the, if you're changing the building for a different use, you're saying?
Yeah.
You'd have to comply with the entire International Building Code. The International Existing Building Code is less stringent, so it really focuses on life safety, egress, fire alarm, sprinkler, all the, safe things that you should be doing as a school anyway.
In that also, we'd have to comply with the full code if we went over the 40% rule.
For structure.
For structure.
Yes. We could still follow the International Existing Building Code for the building.
I think that would be helpful to sort of explain, not necessarily today, but
In a
somewhere in
memo
writing,
or-
in layperson's terms as to what that is, because we did talk about it at the initial meeting, and I guess the definition is maybe a little gray.
Well, it's a code book about that thick.
Yeah.
The International Existing Code is about that thick.
Right.
So to go through and explain every minute detail would be difficult, but the big picture is easily to do.
When you say 40%, exactly what is that? What type
And-
of modification is that?
I want to give you the actual wording, but basically, you have to be tinkering with the structure. It's not like if you come into this room here and renovate it and put new lights in, if you're not touching the structure, you don't count that. But if you're moving these columns because you want an open space and you're changing the exterior wall to put in things, that's changing the structure.
I'm putting you on the spot, but, I mean, could you foresee, and this is a loaded question, us exceeding that in any potential version of a renovation in that building?
I looked at one of your previous options where they suggested tearing down the 1925 option.
Yeah.
But even that, I really, where is it here? Right here. So visually, they took down the one-story section just beside the media center and your gym, took down the 1925 section here, but this is new, some of this is new, so that's really only about a third visually of the building. So even with this one, I would say probably not.
And you're saying the trigger is not change of ownership as much as it's change of use? So if someone came in and said, I
Correct.
wanted to use it as an educational facility, they may be able to go under the existing. But if it was going to be used for other than an education, like
Yes.
housing or things like that?
But, like, community colleges aren't considered education, they're considered business. So education is really pre-K through 12 under the code.
Okay.
So,
That's why it's this big.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I mean, that obviously has to put a significant financial reduction in appraisal value.
It does.
As well as, okay, so only as a school that would qualify as a school based on that big book.
Right.
Ingrid, when we went to the Claremont School, they do not trigger that 40% rule.
No, not even close. I mean,
Because, as you mentioned early, you know, in terms of renovating, it would be a complete gutting, as you say, but that's not necessarily a structural.
Correct.
Just exposing the structure doesn't
No.
trigger, okay.
no.
And even with any additions we do, we can build them so that it's essentially its own building. It's not
Mhm.
gonna be attached to yours.
So that doesn't involve.
So that doesn't count.
Okay.
So it's,
Maybe it's easier to say if you're not tampering with support components of the building.
And I will, I had meant to dig it out for you guys to send it to you, but as part of our notes, I will send that clause so you can read it. It's, page long.
But there's a separate issue relatedly, though, that if you do the gutting and you see some structural issues, obviously you have to properly address them. And I guess you wouldn't know that until
Right. It's
maybe the Stephenson firm digs a little deeper.
But even still, you can't uncover everything. You'd
Mhm.
have to tear down the walls, tear down the ceilings for them to see everything. I mean, they get a good guesstimate, and we carry a higher contingency to account for that. But, for instance, in Claremont, I think we had to spend an extra $15,000 to $20,000 in upgrading structural things that, had broken in the wall, or they had been shored up not as well as they should have.
Mhm.
So on a $12.5 million project, 15 to 20,000 is reasonable.
In reading your notes, you seem to suggest that after doing the elevator and the things they found, and I recognize it's speculation, that you wouldn't expect there'd be a whole lot of other issues that weren't uncovered in the elevator.
Nope. The one structural issue that came up in the elevator project was the corridor that led from your school along the band room and media. So that, we actually had to beef up structure because they didn't know what was under there and what was in the wall.
That and the 5 or 6 stops and 3 floors always confuses me.
Right.
it's everybody.
So that's kind of our review to date on the current site. Let's flip to the Carpenter, and is that what we're calling it, the Carpenter site?
Yes.
So it's a relatively flat site. There are rooms for fields in a building, room for parking. It's adjacent to a rec area here, I saw on one plan. The negatives, we feel, are there's significant wetlands on it, and we don't know the grades of them yet, so some wetlands aren't as bad as others. There are very little site utilities into this building, so you'd have to bring in site utilities. Parking, there's no existing parking that you can really modify.
Was the work that was done on Carpenter so far just to be able to excavate the old buildings, or, because there seems to be a lot of land, I don't know how much of it that's been touched already.
To excavate the old buildings, the foundations for the old greenhouses were removed as part of it, and a lot of it was put into the basement of that structure that was burned by the fire department. And the rest of that work is just grading it out so you can grow some vegetation, you don't have erosion.
And that's what percentage of the property? That maybe about a third or a quarter?
It's a quarter-ish.
Yeah, it's about that, what you can see there, Russ, that was what was disturbed by the greenhouse operation.
So if you're saying I'm just trying to get in my mind, 25% of the 20 acres is at least currently excavated and would
Flat.
be semi-flat.
Prep ready.
The rest, you'll let us know as we go through this.
Right.
Okay.
And
Thank
the
you.
other thing, if you did stick a school over here, you know, these neighbors around this parcel aren't used to having the traffic, the noise, the kids, so it could be an issue.
Can I ask about wetlands?
Yes.
In terms of, like, I don't know the laws concerning them. Are they protected? Can you put fields next to them? I mean, how do they
You
integrate?
can, there's a buffer, and we'll need a civil engineer to really answer that, but there are typically buffers that you have to stay away from. There are different grades of wetlands, so you can impact wetlands, and sometimes they make you mitigate it somewhere else or pay into a fund to the state to protect other wetlands somewhere else. Is it mitigation? What is the name of it? You know, like, it's basically wetlands
Yeah.
mitigation.
Yeah.
You're affecting it and doing a good thing somewhere else.
The buffers can get to be interesting because they can be anywhere between 25 and 100 feet that you can't get within it. So whatever that wetland is, you can start to build. You lose a hell of a lot more space just not being able to even get near it. But I don't think that would be one because that's more like a Great Bay environmental crazy territory.
Shoreland, that's a whole different
Oh,
issue.
yes.
Ingrid, since everyone brought up buffering, if a new facility was put on the Carpenter property, what would be the recommendation from you for vegetation buffer?
As much as possible.
As much as possible. Feet?
I would say at least 150 feet. I mean, that's not very much, really, you know. You know, sound and protection of, you know, the forested land, and, you know, there's probably wildlife in here. So it's a balance of providing what your needs are versus keeping the site as green as it can be. I mean, stormwater is an issue, so you don't want to create a problem where you have, you know, rain and snow and oil and grease running off and then affecting the wetlands or affecting your neighbors. One of the things that the faculty brought up was the snow storage. You have very limited space for snow storage, and there has been an issue where they put it over here and the snow leaches onto your neighbor's property, so we need to address that. So that's what we had for this site, just as a recap. And then your existing elementary school site, there is, you know, like this site, there is still room for expansion. It's a relatively flat site as well. There's room for more parking here for a separate parent drop-off from the bus drop-off. It is set back already for the neighbors, which is nice. And really couldn't find, other than, you know, the site could be larger, couldn't find really too many negative things about this site for the elementary school. You know, maybe more playfield space would be nice. But it's, all in all, it's a pretty nice site for school. Any other things that pop out that we haven't touched upon on any of the sites that you want me to add?
We hadn't talked about security when you were here the first time, and that seems to be an increasing issue. Does that in itself create any additional space or structural requirements, or it's more electronic?
We found it's more electronic, and it's more the front door and protocol of how the school is locked during the day. And sometimes the administration and first floor classrooms are mirrored. You know, they put the film on the classroom windows. But we really, you know, to put a fence up, we haven't seen that. Cameras, obviously.
And the only other thing that just crossed my mind, now that we have the Carpenter property, I'm assuming we won't have a snow removal problem because we can just take it across the street
Odor it,
and put it
right.
there until we use it.
Okay, any other things that pop to mind? Okay, so we can go through kind of our two options and hopefully get a fruitful discussion happening. So I'll ask Chris to go through these.
All right, so, well, kind of the first option is building a new school across the street, which you guys have all seen, we've all looked at it. So then we wanted to look at other options with renovating the schools and giving you what you need. So we have two options here. One is kind of what we presented initially when we came and interviewed as to putting on an addition. And then the second option is moving the 5th grade through 8th over into a new school, just for kind of grounds of discussion. So we were looking at the elementary school. We'd add an addition onto the school as well as a new gym. And we're kind of just massing out generally how large these additions would need to be. So added classrooms, to get rid of the portables would go away, new classrooms, new gym. But all in all, the rest of the site kind of stays as is. So we try to lessen the impact there, give you the classrooms you need, but not go crazy.
And we haven't sat and talked with all the faculty and staff at the elementary school. We're doing that next Tuesday. So until we learn more about what their needs are, that may grow. One of the things, I think, is separating that parent drop-off from the buses, just because it's kind of a free-for-all right now.
So, and with this, we'd address school security. We'll look at reworking the main entrance and the administration and how that whole flow works. More just some limited interior renovations and then some additions of classrooms to get rid of the portables and give you kind of the future growth that you need.
But Chris, that presumes you take the 5th out of that structure, or is that keeping?
That's
as-
keeping.
As is?
That
Keeping
is
it as
keeping.
is.
Okay.
So it's kind of,
One of the things we heard from Chris at our last meeting with you was he really programmatically and educationally does not want the 5th grade to come to this school. So in our next option, we said, okay, if they're not coming here, then one option is to build a 5 through 8, and then they stay in the 4 grade pods, if you will, grade 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12. But that has other challenges.
Yeah, didn't he say he'd prefer to have the 6th grade move out and join?
He did, and that's another option we probably should look at.
Just a couple, I assume they're all one story that you're talking about, the elementary school, not just.
this would be, let's say if we move 6th grade down, we'd probably want to look at building a 2-story classroom addition.
In that
off to the
addition.
side.
So this only which is great, because I'm not sure you have all the pieces yet, but this just replaced, that new classroom just replaces the, what is it, 3 or 2 that we have in temporary buildings? 2 now.
So we'd add, pretty
So
much,
that
we're creating the classrooms.
Like 4 to 6 classroom
Yeah.
type.
Plus providing space for the nurse and dealing with other program issues that they've identified.
So the standalone blue square there,
That would be gone.
That goes
that would be
away.
gone, okay.
Yeah. Portables would not stay.
Should
Okay.
set out. So, and we figure out how many classrooms you want to build so that, you can grow with the school. But all in all, some renovations to the main entrance, a gym, and then classroom addition. So then over at the high school, we looked at is adding on a science classroom wing, a new main entrance, and then some additional classrooms so that you can accommodate the numbers. So that would looked at, and this is kind of just conceptual, is infilling that existing main entrance now, kind of have that awkward side entrance with the ramp, infilling that, which would expand the cafeteria, clean up that whole area, give yourself a new secure main entrance, add on some classrooms to the end, where they're, through the programming, we're identifying some additional classrooms that you don't have currently. And then a science classroom addition off to the side. Thinking science labs are kind of the hardest thing to put into an existing building because they take a lot of power and data and gas lines. So we save that for the new construction just so we're not ripping up the existing to such an extent.
I'm color challenged. So with the Perkins building across the street, is that the same color as the additions, would that stay?
Perkins building
As
is
part
kind
of
of
the-
right where that arrow is,
We got
so
rid of
that
it.
would go away.
Yep.
Okay, what's
So-
that, what's that?
This,
thing?
we're looking across the street, is adding some concessions and locker room buildings, so that when people are over there in bathrooms.
I got, oh, for the
So
field.
kids aren't running
Yes,
back and
okay.
forth, or away teams when they come, they could pull in here and they could have
Okay.
a spot to go.
Yeah, and the track and the extra baseball field
Yep.
were from some needs
They
analysis?
were, and
Okay.
you'll see in my notes from meeting with the athletic department and Chris, right now, these are all town-owned fields, and their use and their this is a wish list, but we wanted to include it in the overall master plan, so even if it's not a part of any bond, you have the space to do it in the future. We also need to show a soccer/lacrosse field, and we were thinking it could use part of the baseball outfield. So that's on the need list as well as baseball field.
Well, I'm saying, when I say need, when you say need, to me, it's been vetted that we really need this, versus it's a wish list, and I don't know the answer, but I look at access to the recreation department, it seems to handle most of whatever the needs are. So is that separate area an absolute need?
I asked that question directly, and what they said was the soccer field and another baseball field are a need. So the track and football, you don't have football right now, you don't have field hockey right now. Those are out there, but in doing the design, it doesn't hurt or cost anything to plan it, so you could do it in the future.
Ingrid, you have the, across on the Carpenter property, you have the concession locker room. What's the size of that compared to the existing Perkins building there now, which is the new art area?
Probably twice the size.
Twice.
And, that's something that probably isn't a need, but it can be priced up easily enough as an alternate.
So in terms of the additions onto the existing structure, you had mentioned a science wing and some extra classrooms and a new entrance. Does this, within that, I don't know if you've kind of drilled a little bit deeper to
Yeah.
kind of pull apart what that would, I know that there are issues for nursing staff and for
Yes.
counseling staff and
We'll
for
get into that.
ADA and, okay.
Yes. And music and
Right.
family consumer science, and yes, so.
And storage, which, by the way, was
Yes.
mentioned 15 times over your 3 pages. It seems
Right.
everybody needs some storage.
Yes. I also told them that they need to purge too, so.
So in this plan assumes that we do a full renovation to the school as well. So we're adding on some classrooms and a main entrance, enlarging the cafeteria, but you're also renovating the rest of the school.
And, in meeting with faculty too and staff, the gym really doesn't need much, those bathrooms. The locker rooms don't really need much, they just need single stall showers, because they're big gang showers right now. So there's a part of this that you really won't have to do much to as well.
And looks like you're losing a big chunk of parking, which is all that going, I'm
Right
trying to get a
here.
sense as to how much parking is going across the street.
Yeah, so, and with some of the teachers' comments is also, we want to look at having a dedicated parent drop-off loop. But yes, so we lose some parking over here,
Mhm.
but with this option, we're proposing moving it all across the street to a nice, big parking lot. And that would be accessed through either an on-street walkway, or we would recommend a tunnel. So when you come out of your cars, you can walk right over to the high school, so kids aren't crossing the street all the time.
And people thought the staff parking over here would be good, so that the kids that drive their cars are on the same side, but the staff would be the ones. And I did ask about how it was working with the art room being across the street, and they said what they've put in has been working, so it hasn't been an issue.
Once you get the acreage down, because you're challenging the fact that it doesn't look like it's 26.1 acres on just the high school, is any of that land, that's the woodland buffer behind the school, available for parking?
Right here?
Yeah.
There's a stream,
Okay.
so it's a pretty big drop,
Drops right off.
right? So topography doesn't work, plus the stream.
That seemed to be in the parking area of the elementary school, if I remember. They
Right, yeah.
go right up to like a 4-foot wall and then
Right along there, yeah.
I can't recall the precise numbers, but I know that there are, I guess, ratios, students in acreage that the DOE has. Would we be rubbing up against those with this layout? Do you know?
No, because the number of your kids is really staying stable, if not declining a little bit.
Right.
So no.
Okay.
But that's a good point. The report's at 26 acres. But for instance, in Claremont, they only have, I think it's just over 10. So we had to get a technical variance from
I get you.
so you'd have to get a variance, but you have an existing school, so.
And a lot of that, I mean, practically speaking, has to do with getting state aid, which doesn't exist now.
Right.
But we'd want to be sensitive to that when we're going through and get appropriate waivers or whatever. So if it comes back one of these days, then
You really don't have to get the waiver, but we like to do it because it just is the letter in the.
right.
And a lot of that's for new construction in schools, and kind of a design guideline, so you can see what you need.
So one of the big issues was right now, the parent drop-off happens right through the parking. So,
Yeah, on that note, when we left the Stevens visit, we were kind of interested in how the bus drop-off on the front that you guys had shoehorned in, very, very tight spot, and we kind of were relating it to our site about possibly doing that in the front of our building.
Right.
And using the original entranceway. See if that was a possibility, maybe we could explore that.
Yeah, and that's what we were looking into here is we'll add a new, kind of reopen the main entrance to the school, but also have this is your kind of
Event
all
entry.
hours event entry, secured entrance. But buses could come here and then exit out of the site.
So that's a road at the white part. is
The
it?
white part, yeah, right
Okay.
out front would be a
Okay.
road. So, and then
so the main entry to the school would actually be back somewhere in here.
So, and that helps with people coming through here, could also come through. And with having parking over here, when events happen, you have the parking to serve the events.
So you're actually with this sharing parking. So this parking is used for this during the day, but this parking is used for the fields at night, rather than building, too much parking.
I know Co-Brown has a tunnel over under Route 4.
Mhm.
I've heard that those are very, very expensive. Does it matter?
Yeah.
I suppose if you have to dig through ledge, but,
And water and.
Relocating the utilities.
Right. Yeah, I continue to see how the existing walk is working for you, and maybe we get a bigger and some speed tables out there if
Mhm.
that happens, but.
It is one of those things that you could design it so it's safe, on grade, and then in the future you can always put it.
There's also a visitor center in Queechee on Route 4, and there's thousands of people that go there, you must know. So they have little blinking lights, so when people are passing, the cars see blinking lights. So, it's doable.
So Ingrid, you said one of the benefits one of the costs of the Carpenter's project was that you don't have utilities.
Right.
Right, so it looks like though that we would be running for bathrooms, you would at least be running sewer and plumbing and probably electric, because you would want some lights on the parking lot and in the
Right.
field. So to just do that, is that the same cost as if you had a structure
No,
over there?
No.
Okay.
Like, right now, the Perkins Building has site electrical and water, so you could, or maybe we design this so that that building is closer to where those things are to cheapen it. If you're doing water and sewer and sprinkler entrance and electrical for a building of this size back in here, that's, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more than a million.
Which may be one of the significant cost jumps in the other design
Right.
that you have by making the new building.
Exactly.
Does that all make sense? And we can jump back to this. So we have another.
Just, would we get an estimate for the tunnel? I mean, would that be something that you guys would include? 'Cause-
We could, yeah. I think, yeah, we should.
Yeah, it's not.
Right, because
Totally,
it's
yeah.
something we can price out. Yeah, you have to have the costs in order to weigh the benefits to see if it's worth doing.
Right.
Is there a typical state-approved design for a tunnel?
It's a good question. That's a civil engineer question. Any civil engineers in the room?
Well, they have one at UNH too, right? Yeah.
Right.
I would say it's 500,000-ish. I mean, my gut.
Oh,
They
sure.
They just
Yeah.
put a second one up at Holiness Prep. So
Yeah.
we can ask
Well-
her.
I mean, it's not cheap.
No, the town spent a lot of time trying to figure out to get a walkway, whether it was covered or not, put across 108 from the mills to the parking areas and stuff like that. And I know that disappeared after 2 or 3 years of healthy discussion.
Yeah, Lebanon put in a walking bridge over 4 lanes of highway, just so that the kids walking to the elementary school could walk to the neighborhood. And I'm sure that was millions.
So, small addition renovation, comprehensive renovation, and some addition to the high school for this one, with all your game fields across the street.
Hey, Chris, before you just to back up on the elementary renovations additions, there's no sixth grade there, correct?
No.
Okay.
But I think that is one that we should look at to see what it would do.
And-
Which would trigger a two-story addition probably.
trigger a
Excuse me.
No, please. I know you can't speak of cost, but I'm assuming page 1 was probably a less costly, I mean, the first alternative of using that space. Is that less costly than building a new building across the street, the second design you have and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't put you on the spot because I
Right.
have no
I know it's
idea.
lower.
We'll
question.
probably end up on number
Question?
15 by the time we're.
On the elementary school, I believe, the last time you were here, there was discussion about second floor. And I know we've been told in the past that we can't put a second story on the existing building, but if I'm not mistaken, you had mentioned that that can be done. Is that a costly adventure, or is?
No. Basically, it's, what would happen is we'd have to have a structural engineer review the footings and the frost wall of the foundation to see if they're large enough to support a second floor plus a roof. So if they are, then we just add a stair. We'd probably have to add an elevator, excuse me, there off the end and go up. If they aren't, then what we would do is go outside, and we've done this at Lyme last year, go outside the existing foundation and pour a new foundation right next to it so that you're pouring a new one that will support it. So
And-
the only thing you could reuse was the slab then, so basically you'd demo the roof, demo the roof joist, demo probably all of the exterior and interior walls, because it's easier to do that than save the walls, and then build a whole new structure.
And doing that would definitely give you the ability to maintain fifth grade there,
Yes.
and potentially bring sixth grade back.
Sixth grade, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And could you do that it's a great question, that little orange place where you're, on the right, that you're replacing the portables? I'm assuming since that's a new construction, can you build a second floor there, and if you've got another 4 to 6 classrooms, not having to do it over the entire school, but that new construction may?
Yeah, down here, we could easily kind of cut this end off, so you demo just this small portion of the building, and then build a nice new 2-story addition on the end. So,
Or can you build on top of the gym? That was my only other question, and that didn't sound totally sane, but,
No, that
It's
would
really
be
tall.
a big stair.
Good views, though.
Yeah.
but that's fine, okay, but that section, so
Yes.
that's the only reason I brought it up, Mike, is if you're already
The only
focused on new in
downside
that.
of that is right now your kindergarten's here, so we're adding new kindergarten classrooms here. So your 6th grade would be right over your kindergarten, so educationally, you kind of try to keep the younger kids near the younger kids and the older kids. So
We
that's,
could even flop the building, kind of move those
Yeah.
kids down here. We have to kind of rework the playground, but totally doable.
As is, it seems that parking's pretty tight there with, up through Fifth. And if you added Sixth, I mean, I think the 6th grade class this year is about 100 kids. I don't know how many staff is needed, but is that,
It seems parking,
Is
you know,
really-
just being around the building, it seems parking is very tight. It seems that the play area is actually one of the smallest, and I actually think that they use, and maybe you can, the play
They
area
use
is
some of
actually,
this.
yeah, that's used, and I
It
think
is.
that the other spot right, well,
Actually, right to the right of the parking lot, that
Oh,
green
here?
space,
yeah.
that's used as well as, at times at recess and for activities.
I have
during
to,
school day.
I have to park in Epping when there's a function going on. I mean, people park,
Spaghetti dinner.
you know, it's way-
It's true.
yeah, it's tight, so that's a consideration as
Okay.
well. And core spaces, are those affected at all by bringing Sixth down?
They are.
And what's there? Would you, in this, I'm sorry, in this plan, would you expand the cafeteria out to the existing gym space?
Yes,
Okay.
so that basically the existing gym will be your cafeteria. And then your nurse, you're changing anyway.
Right.
You'd probably have to add a special ed resource room with the sixth grade classrooms.
Right.
But, and then maybe one other administrative, but
Is-
core wouldn't change that much, because we're already doing, massaging that.
Is that a three-quarter gym, or would that be a full?
That right now, it's shown as a full elementary gym.
Okay. And what does that mean? Is that,
Elementary, middle school, you couldn't have like high school basketball games there.
right,
Sometimes people, they like to
It's
design
like
it
6,000
for high
square
school.
feet,
okay.
rather than 9.
And storage is at a premium, and the storage room now is off, well, it's kind of like over here. Would we lose that, or?
No? If anything, we'd add to it. And then we could also, a lot of elementary schools have stages, so we'd want a real platform for performances, small, 10, 15 feet. But we could price out adding that at the end of this new space too.
And this we could, say if we were gonna add the sixth grade, and we were gonna do a new wing down on one end, we could look at turning the gym this way, which would take up a couple of these classrooms, but that could become core space, administration, because you lose the windows, but we could enlarge the cafeteria, it'd be right off the main entrance. So there's lots of variations that we could play with.
I just asked Sean, would it be a major issue if the gym is where it is now? I know that green area is used quite a bit.
We would like to have that, as much green space as possible,
Yeah.
because it's hard to do, would lose it, but to get a gym that's a little bigger than we currently have, I think that's,
Good exchange.
you have to have those exchange at times.
Yeah.
One of the things is, how valued are these front lawns, if you will?
Mhm.
We could take a new head-in parking and then take some of this parking away, and have another play space back in here, and augment this one to gain more green space, but,
Right.
where do you want your green space? Next to the school, or, so where do you put the parking?
Right. I think that's another issue too, is parking is incredibly tight there currently, and,
So how many more spaces would you think, and I know we're gonna talk about
Oh,
this.
boy, that's a great question. I would probably say you would want at least another 50 spaces or so. I mean, I have no dedicated visitor parking or anything on that lines, because it's all taken up, and currently have people wrapped around the parking lot.
And there is actually parking in the back right now, too, back of the
Right.
loop, and there's parking back there.
Right here?
Yeah, and that's a
Yeah.
kind of pull, that's a head-in parking.
Okay.
And then people are constantly just creatively parking
Right.
on the
Yeah.
green space.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, all the time.
And it gets really tight in the
Any morning,
winter.
any afternoon, there's people parked in the
I don't
green
know what
space.
backs up against that, but I know that you had that, it was like a 4-foot wall, and then you had space behind it, that gray on the bottom, which was maybe up about 4 or 5 feet greater.
There's that grade change.
Yeah, I didn't know if you can, what you were backing up against. If
Ledge.
you
It's a
did
huge
another
amount of
10
ledge out
feet.
back.
It's all,
there.
it's all ledge, and it's the green space for the subdivision behind it. It's the part of the open space, part of the 35 acres of open space.
So it wouldn't be expandable. They're-
Well, that's
Use the
been,
back
that's been
as
looked
well.
at. I could find my notes from a long time ago on what it would take to drill and blast that and crush it and get it out of there. And, but that's been looked at.
Ingrid, excuse me. Ingrid, on the left of the building, on the driveway coming in,
Right.
is it possible to put parking space there?
Right here?
No, keep coming inside, right in there, yeah.
That's pretty tight. There's a little addition here, and I think if I'm,
Sprinkler.
there's a little stream here
Is it-
too. So it
Yeah.
pinches down.
Yeah, they just put a new culvert under the
But-
driveway right
But
there.
right in
Yeah.
here, what, I mean, to me, this would be the best place to stick parking, because you could stick in one of these, and that's your most efficient use of a space.
Right.
And it's to the side, so then you'd have to figure out, okay, is this the playground in here? Which I think for the kindergarten makes sense.
So Ingrid, if we had this
It's pretty
space,
small as is, yeah. I'd have to really look.
would
Oh,
that?
that'd be huge.
Would that, how would that factor in?
It's a really small.
What were you talking about? I'm sorry. I
The
missed that.
property.
The
yeah.
space hidden in here.
Oh, yeah.
How might that help us out? I know I just put you on the spot. and you
Yeah,
haven't had
that would
time
help
to-
immensely.
To think about that, but I
Definitely.
suppose
Are we
you could.
doing force majeure and eminent domain again, or?
Oh, it's for sale.
You can only
right?
hope, huh, as a lawyer.
It was attempted a few years ago, Mike, if you're not.
Well, you're talking about.
Not on
No, he's
that
talking about the property that's
Not
for
on
sale
that.
right
Not
now.
on that
Talking about
property,
two
this
different
property's for
parcels.
sale.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
we'd
on the
like to
market.
see if we can make it work on your existing site so
Yeah.
that you don't have to buy. So worst case, we'd like to try to solve the
Right.
problem, and,
Right.
but of course, that would help immensely. Yeah.
That'd be great, green space for planning, future addition, if you, town grows, you have those options.
Because 50 parking spaces is probably at least 10,000 square feet,
Right,
plus, plus access lanes,
right.
yeah.
But you'd only need the extra parking spaces if we were to follow through with potentially moving sixth grade down, correct?
What I'm hearing
Kinda
is,
You
need
would
it.
still need parking now. I mean, we are
And you-
hammered in as tight as possible up there. We have people parking on the sides of the parking lot currently.
And
And
when the
just
snow comes.
access to get in and out that parking lot is just really chaotic at the start and the end of the day, and part of it's due to the fact people are hunting for parking.
Well, it's a little scary because the kids are really little.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes you can't see them through the cars. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of foot traffic and hunting for parking and.
Right.
But Skip, you're talking about, sounds like a quarter to a third of an acre, at least for 50 spaces or something like that. when you say
Oh,
10,000.
absolutely, yeah, you'd probably need, depending upon the configuration, 15,000 square feet with access roads and stuff.
About a third of an acre, yeah.
Ingrid, could you, if you did an addition on the end where we talked about maybe putting 2 stories in there?
Right here?
Could you reconfigure the front of the building to be, parking on where the current playground is? And,
this,
yeah, the
yeah,
parking to
right
be.
here too.
Well, parking to be over where the current playground is.
Oh, right here,
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
And then have the front of the building be part of that new structure, right? So the entrance could come in there, and then where the current parking lot be green space and playground?
You could, that is another option, yeah. I don't know, what is the condition of this pavement? Is it all potholes, or is it pretty good?
It's terrible.
I'll agree on the
It's
plan.
cracked, it's
So-
old, it's,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that means we'd probably redo it anyway.
There you go, right, we can,
I was just drawing in here, I mean, you could easily get 50 spaces if you did head-in parking here, and then one of the items that we were looking at is bringing the parent drop-off around, and you could do head-in parking like you have here on the back side of here. So we wouldn't necessarily need to put parking over here. I don't know the extent of the play structures and how expensive they are, because if they're expensive things to move, we don't want to if we don't
Right,
have to,
right.
or their age.
Ingrid, how would that parent drop-off work? They would drop off on the other side of the parking lot? They would-
Yeah, not very well.
Okay. Yeah.
So maybe buses, we haven't really met to
Mhm.
see how many
Right.
buses you have, how many parent drop-offs, are there 100 cars, probably?
Yeah, in that neighborhood.
What we typically try to do is have one go on the backside and one, so you've really separated them. And it's usually the parents that are the problem. So we have them come in the back because they like to queue up and sometimes
Right.
double queue.
Right.
And then they enter on the backside and the kids wait in the gym for dismissal.
Right.
Is it fair to say, in looking at this, and I know we spoke about it with the elementary school, the elementary school that you have down here is basically just saying, get rid of the portable classrooms and provide a better gym facility, or, but not growth, not, excess, not moving to sixth grade, et cetera. In looking at the high school, it seems to me to be sort of similar. I mean, you're doing the science, which is adding space. I don't know how many classrooms are located in that, but the rest of it seems to be more adding additional space for common use and not classroom, and being able to block the entrance off.
There's a few classrooms, like they need a art middle school, art classroom, Spanish classroom, health classroom.
Right. Okay, so, I mean, we're adding some space to that.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So, first option. So then we looked at, what if we move sixth grade out of here?
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade, excuse me. So we move fifth grade up into a new building.
And these portables would be gone.
So at the elementary school, all we're looking to do is renovate the main entrance to give yourself the safe, secure school, add on a gym, and do some rework of the cafeteria, but, so really limited scope there, because we're moving fifth grade out. So then we look up at the high school. So with that, we looked at essentially only doing a new, small main entrance addition, so infilling that little node that you have there with, and expanding the cafeteria. And the big part of it is we're moving 5 through 8 across the street into a new building. So that would be on the site across the street. Parking lays out the same, so you'd be able to utilize the parking for the fields as well as the school. And you could have the connection across the street to the existing high school. Existing high school would have a full renovation, kind of same type of renovation that we were proposing in the last one, but limited additions because you're reducing the need. And then with the new school, that could take the place of the concessions and the locker rooms and the weight rooms. Put all that across the street. This is showing a gym as well. So, but with this, if we had 350 students in this new building, you're looking at around 56,000 square feet of new building space. So that comes at a cost.
What was the square footage again?
56,000?
Versus the 48?
48 that you had in the notes on this, I think.
Oh, yes, excuse me, sorry. Updated, I did it from 300 to 350 students.
We looked at your projections, and you really need to do the core for the maximum amount of kids. So that was around 350.
So, yeah, 350 students moving them across the street would be about 56,000 square feet of new building space. But with that, we've reduced what we're doing to the high school. So it really is just enlarging the core.
Yeah, and it's taking the excess space needed for additions, the excess space additions, so that those uses can fit in the existing facilities, and doing a new school. The downside is operational costs, staffing costs, and then you would have a third gym versus the other option, 2 gyms and a cafeteria.
I recognize from this that you'd say you'd be adding less to both of the existing schools, but you're still talking about renovating the existing space. Does it significantly change the amount of renovation by doing this plan, or?
Not really.
Okay, so as I'm looking at this, this is, you're saving some of the additions,
Right.
but you're not saving much in the renovation of the existing blue space, and you're adding a building.
Correct.
Yep.
So I sort of look at the first one as we're selectively adding space where we can, and renovating the old building, but keeping you down at 2 sites, your point, versus 3 sites now, where renovation won't change a new building, and you have 3 facilities that you need to manage.
Yeah. Another thing with this site is, with the new building, is you're constricting your future field use. And you'll see the kind of the blue line here is the wetlands. So you're eating up some really valuable site for future fields. That being said, you're using it for a new school, so.
Chris, this is a two-story building.
Yeah.
Do we
And
have
does this have a caf and a gym and common space? And so it's discrete, meaning that it's a standalone entity, so they're not crossing the street and going to a gym
Exactly.
in the other structure or having a new caf or anything like that. So it's a completely autonomous.
Yep.
It probably would be a satellite kitchen, though. You probably wouldn't
Yep.
have, if the food would be cooked and shipped in.
Do we have a wetlands square footage number on the Carpenter site?
Let's look back.
Yeah, you did
Not
somewhere.
off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was in this packet.
Would getting some of that stuff down in that fact sheet and just giving us dimensions and
Yes.
stuff next time be useful, just so we have a reference. You look like you have an answer.
I have an answer on the acreage issue, but I don't have this wetlands one yet. Give me a minute.
There's a
Looking through the same
wetlands
stuff.
map that was in our packet that you guys had sent to us.
Trust nothing.
Yeah, I know. Well,
Yeah, so 26 should have a bigger,
yeah.
you guys probably can't see this, but it is taking into account essentially all of this space. Yeah.
But that's town-owned.
Yeah, so it's
Not that it's different, but it is.
No, but I can see him using, because the facilities and the athletic fields are used primarily by the schools during the day, et cetera. So,
So on your second
So
option, Ingrid,
we don't have that answer.
Essentially,
No.
No.
I mean, you have almost
All we
unlimited
got
growth
is
for,
26
you know,
acres.
open
It's at
expansion
least a
at every
portion.
school, right? You're not stuck. Like,
Right.
As opposed to the first proposal, you can't really.
Pretty
keep-
stuck.
Keep bumping out anymore.
Correct.
So for the first option, you've done as much as you can for potential growth. I mean, that's kind of, the investment is there, and, yeah, so you kind of max out.
Some things, we initially came up with some other ideas of if we moved the 5th grade over here, so that was gonna add even more. So this was a little larger, this space came out, so there's room to expand.
I'd be interested in what you get from the principals, et cetera, because that was the point when we met with them. Did we meet with them the last time you guys were here, or I think we met with them separately, right?
They were
Very
But
good.
they were
here.
saying
Yeah,
Last time
yeah.
Ingrid was
Yeah,
in.
okay.
Yep.
That
Grade, no.
up to 6th grade
Right.
was a great controlled environment, and then the 7th grade up started to get to be so how thrilled they would be about a 4th through 8th, or 5th through 8th
Right.
facility.
And
Maybe great building-wise, but
Yeah. Well, educationally too, I've heard in other districts that we've worked on, it's the kids, when they do less transitions, are happier and better schooled. But grade 1 through 4, grade 5 through 8, and grade 9 through 12. So those groups of kids stay together in relatively the same size schools. So that is a benefit, but the downside is operational cost and another gym.
So when we talk operational costs, I know this isn't something that you would think about, but it seems to me that that would mean a principal, administrative staff, custodial staff. Nurse.
Another
So.
librarian maybe, or
Yep.
shared,
Guidance.
yeah, so
Right.
those are salaries and
I asked the
It's a whole
question
new
of.
school.
it's a whole new school.
It's a whole new school.
I asked the question about the
Suck.
wetlands because the other thing that we've talked about in the past, at a past meeting, but we haven't talked about it here tonight, is the K through 8 across the street. So my question was, does it fit physically? Can you put a K through 8 on that site?
sounds like.
With
My
no-
gut is saying you really wouldn't want to do that, because then you really have very little play fields. You know, if you look graphically, take my hand, that's that site. You've got to put, it's basically the same if you're trying to stay out of the wetlands. And that's K through 4 or 5, right? So,
How much space are you showing us with the dotted lines? Is that half the property? It's less than 10 acres?
this here,
No, I'm saying across the street. Is that the whole Carpenter property, or,
that is,
Pretty
there's
much,
a
yeah.
little chunk here that we aren't showing, but
and you're saying 50 to 70% of that's wetlands now?
we're not saying, we're interpreting it from
Okay. Yeah,
maps.
well,
Yeah, so we do have to get more information on that. And I don't know what value they are, you know, are they low valued wetlands, or are they really important ones? I don't know.
They still have setbacks.
Yeah, and some we can build fields on, but
Well, and in Lebanon too, they had a lot of wetlands, and they ended up having to give, you know, I think over $100,000 to the state to be able to build over them. So that's an added cost that we don't know, and how do you figure that out?
sort of chump change in the whole picture.
Well, to some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of $20 million versus an extra
Yeah.
100,000.
You know, one thing we need to keep in mind here, though, is that in terms of the baseball field, and this is kind of surprising to me about the level of importance on a baseball field, which you'd use in a high school season about, how much, Mike? A couple months out of the year? You don't play fall ball. So we've got to be a little careful about our priorities here, you know, in terms of a baseball field taking up a huge chunk of that land versus where you have one across the street here versus the potential area for a school.
Well, that
Just
and
my
the thought
thought.
before, I think, was using it as a shared facility. We do that already in the rec fields. What kind of stress they have in there with the scheduling and stuff like that. Obviously, it's survived for this long, but I thought that was kind of nice that we had a shared recreational facility rather than building the same. And across the street, we have another ball field, but if it's needed.
The other issue with, I'm just thinking the K through 8 or K through 7 over here, we found too with elementary schools, your kindergarten, preschool if you have it, first grade, and all the core spaces have to be on the first floor. So that means your building footprint is a lot bigger. Because they can't go upstairs, so all the art rooms, the media, everything has to be on the first floor because they can't go upstairs. So that's why I really, yes, we could do it, there'd just be wetlands, you know,
It's
mitigation.
generally cheaper to go up than out, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. That's why we were thinking 5 through 8 maybe, because you could stack and have 2 stories.
So it seems to me that there's some other options in here, and I appreciate these, but it seems like, I mean, there could be, you know, and I know that at some point we had talked about having, you know, keeping the senior high, I mean, I'm just thinking about decreasing the number of staff that you would use, and having like extra wings, I suppose, across the street, whether or not that's other classrooms or gyms, the extra gym, I mean, the enhanced gym, or whatever that is. I mean, have you thought about those things so that you could?
We tend to try to keep the school buildings
Yeah.
together. I mean, in our climate, you know, inclement weather, and we're in school a lot of the winter months, so to have them
Schlepping
go
back and forth
Yeah, I mean, in
across.
Florida it can work, you know, where it
Yeah.
rains, but I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if we can solve that on the existing site, I think that's best.
I look at a good portion of what I hope this committee will achieve is being able to put realistic limits on things, okay? And I'm not speaking cost now. I think in people's minds, the Carpenter property, when it was acquired, was, gee, we can build a whole new school complex there, and now I'm hearing, gee, a lot of it's wetlands, and though we may not know the specifics, that may be significantly constraining on how you utilize the space or not. And as we're going through this, I'd love to, you know, if there are lines in the sand that says, guess what? The Carpenter property, you can build 48,000-foot facility, square foot, or 56,000. But you're not gonna have much more than that once you put in parking and things like that. At least gets people out of we can build an entire new facility that fits everybody in the town in there. And then you may be speaking 3 buildings, or stay with 2, and just that, I thought it'd been very useful tonight to think about that. But the constraints of the Carpenter property, and do we have any buffer room around either of the other facilities, like you're saying not much, maybe you can squeeze some parking in here.
So you're good. Did you look at flipping the 2 properties? So making that, yes, so a new structure on the Carpenter property and where the existing property is.
Right.
And this is probably very expensive to
Right.
level that and make that fields, which then would actually bump up against the town fields. I mean, it seems like that, just in terms of the ease of use, parking lots and fields that abut other fields seems to be, I don't know, did you think about that? 'Cause
We did,
Yeah.
and there's a few reasons why we're proposing this, if you're going to do any new. First off, if you're doing a master plan of all the fields that are wanted and needed, this track doesn't fit on here due to the topography, due to the wetlands. Secondly, this gym and your elevator, I mean, there's millions of dollars of building and infrastructure here that we really aren't touching, that you would just be, making go away. And I just, that's a big factor I think we need to, as we go through these options and look at some of these things, we just need to remember. Because not only would you be the cost of demo, and to build this new would be more than the millions that it's worth today. So it costs more to build it today.
I'm just looking at Appledore Engineering, Division of Tie and Bonds drawings from last time on the last vote around on the Carpenter property. It was a 171 square foot building. They seem to have I don't know if people can see, but they seem to have a wing of it heading into these wetlands. Is that just erroneous? I mean-
No, you can build in wetlands, it's just, you're gonna have to mitigate them.
Mhm.
There's a process with DES, et cetera, on making
Right.
special wetlands applications, and as you said, there are at least 2 classifications they may have gotten final. By the way, the Army Corps of Engineers is also involved in some of these. I know some of this stuff not because I study it, it's because I live right on Great Bay and Moody Point, and every issue, including running our own water and sewer system, which we do. So to survive, we've had to get educated on all this.
Ingrid, just to bring up Mike brought up where this whole wing seems to be on some sort of wetlands. What wetlands, we don't know at this point. But if they had done their due diligence, there must be some significant information or work that was done on those wetlands. Have you come across any of that, or?
I have not yet.
It'd be nice.
Yeah, so
Because I just can't see someone,
I bet you.
we can call Brad at
Yeah.
Time Bond and pick his brain a
Yeah.
little bit. Is there a wetland scientist that you guys would have used? Anyone local in town here, or?
Well, it might have been
most of them.
New Hampshire Soils Consultants, which is no longer, and that's
Wow.
GZA.
Oh, GZA,
Yeah,
okay.
it's still here in town.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's numerous others, and DES, I'm sure, probably has.
But
I don't know.
As I mentioned, Appledore was involved in this. They
Yeah.
probably can
Yep.
click a couple buttons and get us all they have, so.
I know those guys, I knew them all, but.
But again, yeah, in terms of before you bought the property, I mean, who was the one that spearheaded the buying of it?
The school was the one who bought the property, and it
But are those
asked
people
for
gone?
partial funding from the town, which it gave them, but it was, the town owns 28.3% of the land if it's not used for a new school. Usual New Hampshire, everybody's got their finger in whatever, but the school bought it. I would assume there was an environmental survey, but it was a school issue, and that's separate in the town.
Okay.
I don't remember any discussion of wetlands or that we surveyed it as a building site back when it was purchased. It was just across, the sale pitch was, it was across the street,
And maybe we do a site walk at our next meeting before it gets dark, to go out there ourselves and really see. I mean, we're not wetland scientists, but
I'm sure there's a wetlands report.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there must be
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
DES may know, I mean, but it also may be the school who needs to ask.
I was gonna say, who's responsible for chasing that down? Like, is that something that one of us should be working on?
If you don't mind, it's
Okay.
more of a civil engineer, yeah, but it's not a big deal, we're working with Brad too.
I'll call the school office tomorrow to make sure we don't have anything right on hand, and if not,
Okay.
we can get in touch with Appledore.
Yeah, I mean, one of the options is maybe it's a K through, 6 or K through 7 over here to alleviate the additions we do, and then you try to sell this building. This building is in pretty good shape. It's 1 story, so you wouldn't need to add an elevator. I think saleability, this building would probably be more usable for other uses rather than this building.
There's an assisted living right next door, so campus-style
Right.
situation.
Do you have a senior center in town?
We do.
True,
Two,
Oh, really?
right,
Okay.
two. Yeah.
don't ask. One of them used to be the old fire station, I think, right?
Ambulance department,
Right.
ambulance building.
The other is privately owned.
It is.
It's Newmarket. Yeah, let's find out if we have anything. It's been my observation, feel free to shoot me if you want, that depending on the questions you ask, you will get back a different set of answers from the professionals. So if you're saying, I'm gonna build a school here, let's talk about wetlands, maybe the difference than you get if you're gonna say, I'm gonna do a housing development, or I'm gonna put ball fields, or whatever. I think you have to take the question seriously of knowing if there are some serious wetlands there, and if they're high-class rather than man-made type of wetlands, and they go into the water supply, you could be seriously increasing the cost of building it up. So if we have a clear answer from Appledore, if not, getting someone who's going to give you a conservative view, not a best use.
Right.
Okay, I want to just go back to, especially the track, because it wasn't in your question, your response to me, you talked about kind of that being a priority. Is that something that, who prioritized that?
This was from the athletic department, and it was more of wasn't a need, because you don't have a football team now. It was just suggested that it has come up in the past in the community for at least a track. So if in looking at this overall campus, if we could somehow plan a space for it. So it's something the community, I think, needs to talk about and tell us if that's a need for you in the future or not.
No, it just seemed like that was the priority, and so the educational facility was being
Right.
worked
No.
around that, and I thought, wait a minute, it's a little bit like the cart pulling the horse there.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out all the needs, the wishes, and then trying to see how the pieces fit in different options to see what makes the most sense. So no, the education obviously, and athletics, and art, and special ed, and all the different interest groups. But it's the education is the number one. But, parking is another thing we have to balance in there, and drop-offs.
So Ingrid, under this scenario with 3 buildings, who would be the one to answer the operational costs? Would it be the principals in the first instance, just to sort of give us a ballpark we're gonna need? Because I know,
Yes.
I mean, for whatever, you still have all the grades, so you still need all the same teachers, and nurses and whatnot. Is it really, is it increased that much more? What is
Yeah.
it? And I don't know off the top of my head. But that's a substantial operating issue over the lifetimes of these buildings that we're talking about.
Right.
But also, I'm wondering, Skip just mentioned the K through 8 or some other configuration across the street. In that same vein, are there, because I'm thinking of the tours we went on, are there operational efficiencies to be had by having 2 buildings within roc's throw of one another?
Sure.
Mike, we can sit down with Christine and the principals, and I think Christine's probably the best one who has the
Yes.
financials. God bless our principals if they know what the cost of gas and heating and electric is.
Because what I saw in
Like you're talking
Keene,
about personnel.
yeah, I'm talking about personnel. What I saw in Keene, and I'm talking about space. What we saw in Keene, right, was they had the new middle school served as the focal food prep area. They had a loading dock, and there's an elementary school down the street. I don't know how many other schools that common cafeteria prepped for and sort of shipped out, but and I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, this is all, but just to say, so that was one aspect. They had a common heating plant that heated the SAU office. By the way, I don't want to add to the mix much, but let's keep it in the back of our brains that may be an issue too, of taking this office out. It may be a win-win for the town, but we can deal with that. But I just see some potential operational efficiencies there too. You could have one school resource officer, sort of covering both. You could have perhaps one maintenance staff. I wouldn't think, crossing the street and handling both. Common storage facilities. Am I missing anything?
I think the easiest way to attack that, if you want to, and where the architectural side's going to go, is as we form the subcommittees and stuff, we have enough familiarity on the budget committee, et cetera, to work with Christine and try to break down the school in a way people can understand. As I mentioned last time, you're going to be in the 80 to 85% people cost, okay? And of that people cost, probably only 5 or 10% of it is support staff. So it's mostly teachers. So if you're looking at a $16, $17 million cost to run the school systems, these operating efficiencies and some of the great ideas you had about cogen, and being able to burn chips and use that as a shared facility for heating, all great. But if you're looking about things that are going to seismically change the cost, you're not. Unless you deal with reducing teachers or support staff. And I'm not trying to burst a bubble, I'm just trying to tell you in the beginning, as people get excited about these efficiencies, my gut tells me that's not going to move the meter to such an extent. And if you're adding a third facility, you may be saying, look, we can run 3 facilities for the price we used to run 2 because we have all these operational efficiencies. That may be possible, other than staffing.
Like
I just didn't want you to get down the road too far.
This was Keene that had done the,
Yeah.
or was it Claremont?
It was Keene, and they had, the common generation, they had a food prep kitchen, I guess, at the middle school, so the other schools didn't have to have that full, kitchen. Russ, your point is well taken, it's a good
Is
one.
Keene the same size as us?
Keene's bigger. Yeah, bigger. We're 6,000 there.
Mike, didn't they do Meals on Wheels too from that facility?
I
Or
think
Yeah,
they might have done.
and that's, that's the concern from the people who, with all the
Yeah.
issues we've talked about. With 1,200 kids in the school system, give or take 5%, because I think that's probably what it averages out. There's not a whole lot of economies of scale. And if you're adding 3 buildings to that,
The number of kids that you have in your district, I think 3 facilities is a little overkill.
yeah, I mean, whether it is or it isn't, I'm just saying at Keene, where you're saying I got 6,000 kids, and if I have one kitchen that's supplying food to everybody and we can run this like clockwork, that's great, but that's 5 times the size we are, and
But
so.
it seems to me you could get empiricals on just percentage reduction in costs, right? So, I mean, they could say, we've reduced our cost by X number of percentage, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you wouldn't want to look at the raw numbers, but the percentages of, maybe money
easiest
savings
way-
for energy efficiency, or money savings for creating a common kitchen or something like that. I mean, and that's easy, we could just call it.
We can figure that out, but Russ's point is a good one. If you think of the whole cost pie chart, I think it's 80+%, maybe 80, I forget what it is. We're going over that right now with the budget. 80% of it is staffing, And so when we're talking about these efficiencies, we're not talking about a silver bullet that's going to, I mean, we're talking maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars per year, perhaps. I don't want to throw numbers out, but I was thinking even beyond that, whether there were staffing efficiencies as well. I don't know the answer to
There
that.
could be.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, why don't we spend maybe the next several weeks asking the questions
Yep.
once we get of Christine and the school to lay it out, and how many people are involved in teaching, how many are in support staff for special ed. I mean, we've tried to do
Yep.
this in the budget committee over the years with varying degrees of success. And then what are the other operating costs? Because
And
we
then-
don't have a huge maintenance staff. They farm out, some of the landscaping work, and the town doesn't. So I'm just thinking there's just not, to your point, when somebody comes in and said, gee, we can save you $50,000 a year, if it's off 500,000, or gee, you need to be 3,000 people in order to get that efficiency, not 300 kids in a school.
It's a complicated number, because if I may, if you had this scenario, this is sort of, I'll call it a campus scenario, and and this property was sold, that would offset the cost of the project, but also the town's benefit. This would be back on the tax rolls for Infinity, which is, another, I suppose,
Yeah, but,
big picture.
and I'm just saying, as we're talking, Ingrid's point, if it's going to be an alternate use, then whatever's going to go in there is just effectively looking at land and demolition costs, because they're going to have to wipe that off the face of the earth.
But with that building, though, as I understand it, you might not run into the issues. This is an 80s building.
Right.
This is a,
I think the right user could reuse the existing structure.
Without doing the seismic things you talked about before, because it's an alternate use?
I don't know that or not.
Okay. And all I'm saying is,
Better
I
constructed building.
synthesize all those things you're saying in
and so
somewhere in
one
here.
thing we've identified here is we got a lot of things to sort of get our arms around.
Getting the base course of the school, just so
Right.
if it's attackable, we can attack it, we can ask knowledgeable people, what would happen if you change this process this way? Could you save 20% in your staff? Great dialogue. If it turns out to be a couple $100,000 a year, we could spend the time, but I'm not sure it's the best use of the time.
And, does it make sense to look at if we were going to abandon this K through 8 here and, a new, has that been looked at?
Not that I know of. I just, and this is my amateur showing through, but reading the DOE manual, I recall that it's difficult to repurpose high school buildings for elementary buildings.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
play areas, yeah.
Yeah, and just in terms of rooms and
That's
whatnot.
true.
So if, again, to Russ's point, we want to sort of keep it in the ballpark,
Mhm.
and maybe if you think that that's like sort of within the ballpark
Not
type of
really.
thing.
The play areas,
Yeah.
really, this is a much better site for the
Yeah.
lower grades.
But what was the old, when we said, let's build a new junior, senior high school, it was in the 85 to 110,000, I forget so many numbers, wasn't it somewhere in that?
Numbers you're talking about?
Square footage?
Yeah.
The new junior, senior high.
Yeah.
110,000 square feet?
Okay.
Oh, and the JC, 104 and change. Yeah.
And the one we had that was proposed was that size or slightly larger or something?
170.
171.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so, sorry I'm bringing up numbers, and thanks for remembering these, but the age between us, we need a village, to remember some of the, but you're
I'll
talking.
swap the age with you.
You're talking a 48,000 square foot facility, and if you're going to be putting, and just visually, if you're going to be putting any athletic fields there,
Right.
with the limitation of the wetlands that we don't know, and now you're saying the old junior, senior high school plan was 170,000, even if that was too large, that's 3 times the size of the building. And my guess is your eyeballs are flooding in your head saying, we can't build a 170,000 square foot facility there, even if we leveled the wetlands. And that's what I mean by getting some at least realistic parameters. Is operating cost something we can attack? Can we only build a 30,000 or 50,000 square foot facility because of wetlands issues? And if that brings us back to renovation or demolition, that's fine. If alternate use, you know, your point, if we can use one of the properties and sell it, even if it's Carpenter, at least Carpenter, you don't have alternate use because there's nothing there anymore. But the other ones, I can't see a developer looking at it much more than real estate.
Right.
If he's got to go through all new building codes and very little of that's gonna, and those just, that's gonna take 50% of the conversation off the table. And that's what I'm trying to,
Yeah, and
It's
and
tough to
think,
lose all those things that you have there in terms of the gym and the elevators and.
that would be some of the most helpful, is getting us the constraints so we can manage it.
and even just in thinking about if you're gonna be selling properties and changing the campus around, the Carpenter property is subdividable, in terms of, you know, maybe you need a piece of it, okay?
And then you subdivide, and this is a separate piece that you
Yeah,
sell.
so if you need a piece of it for fields and parking and this and that,
And the entrance to
you could always sell a piece of it off.
the entrance to the elementary school is like the Black Bear Tiff. It's got one hinky little road going in with no other egress to the property because it's surrounded. So, for those of you who don't know Black Bear Tiff,
I thought the world knew about that.
yeah. It's not your commercially most reasonable saleable area with only one means of egress.
So I'm hearing we should look at this option with moving the sixth grade down here and going up 2 stories. So that's another option. And then I'm hearing that we need to learn more about the wetlands to see if we could possibly fit a K through some grade level and what that grade level probably is, to see what we would need to do with that. And then possibly selling that.
I don't know if we asked that question last week about, Renee Hannon, Principal Pine as well, about, you know, is that a good configuration educationally, a K through 8, you know?
K through 8's are pretty prominent still in the state of New Hampshire. I worked at a K-8 building for 10 years.
Mhm. Whereabouts was that one?
That was in Auburn.
Auburn.
Yep. And I know Candia also is still a K-8 school that are more local. But, I mean, it has its pros and cons like anything. You know, when I was in Auburn, they had staggered start times for the middle school and elementary school. So the kids came in, it was more of a K-8 building, housing 2 schools at separate times. In terms of staffing, I mean, it worked pretty well. You had one set of teachers there. It was tight. Advantages are, a lot of times, the kids in the upper grade in the middle school would come down and work with some of the lower grades, that sort of thing. You have an ease, there's that transition that goes in that you truly know the student as they walk in and as they're progressing through, so there's always that resource right within the building of those teachers who have worked with Sean when he was in 4th grade, when he moved in, and now he's in 8th grade, what works for him, that sort of thing. So it was a challenge in terms of, again, you have that disparity. You got kindergarten and 8th graders in there too, and then we talked about 5th with 12th graders. It's sort of that same sort of thing. It depends on how you would set it up.
Right.
In terms of
Lunch.
if you have,
2 gyms.
lunch.
Because you'd have 770 kids in
Right,
that
you would
school.
definitely still have to have you have to look at it, probably a larger gym, because now you're looking at a more of a middle school size gym that you would have to have.
If not 2, like a gym and a smaller space.
Yeah, we had, when in Auburn, it was 1, had a series of lunches because the cafeteria was undersized for the building at the time. I know that was some of the issues.
How many kids were in that school?
We had about, when I left, around 580 or so.
So
So
this
it's
would be,
about the size of the elementary school, well, a little
Right.
bigger than the current elementary population here.
So we identified, I had my wheels are turning here, I guess this is a free-for-all. So, one positive or con of pro, we said, is access to these fields. Now, if you had this school over here, 8th grade, they'd also have access to it. Obviously, the upper grades, the lower grades would use it, but The other thing, is my comment earlier about parking, it's really no, there are a lot of events here. You know what I mean, parent nights and plays and whatnot, and I am literally parking off the map up here because I'm usually late. But if you were smart and these two schools were talking to each other, you have an event here, you could use this parking, vice versa.
Yeah.
You know?
I'd say wait them out, because it's gonna take at least,
Yeah.
2-3 years to get something done and built. By that time, you won't have the needs in the elementary school, you'll be parking by the house.
That's right, just wait.
Chris, if we went K through 8, that would be how many students extra? The total K through 8 would be how many?
770.
And times square footage, so how big would that school be?
130,000 square feet. Minimum, that's
Yeah.
base number, no frills.
You're talking the same size, sort of, as just the junior, senior high school. I mean, we're not really off the 100 a class, are we? I mean,
But in
granted,
terms
I
of
could be
total
off
square-
30 or 40 here, but
In terms of total square footage in the district, I mean, I think that's what you're looking at, aren't you? Because then you'd minus out the elementary
well,
school.
that, and if you're talking either you're scheduling lunch, because if you don't want them in the cafeteria at some time from 9:30 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, or you have 2 cafeterias, because the diversity of the kids, size-wise, the kindergarten, I'm sure
Most of
it's
the
maybe
meetings
short.
I've been in just have one calf.
You combine, like 7th and
Yeah.
8th graders would eat lunch together.
Yeah, you put 7th and 8th grader eat together, and put your 5th and 6th together.
But if you need 2 gyms, and if you need, rather than one, and at least I've listened to some of the discussion, some of it sounds like it may double up with that wider range in the building.
It could.
And some of it may not. And so all I'm trying to do is to say, I love the ideas, but is there a way to say, we can't fit a 130,000 square foot facility in Carpenter? So let's get that, or yes, we can, but we got wetlands hurdles and these kind of hurdles. Because if we're dealing with some of those constraints, I'd just rather not spend the energy in thinking about something that somebody's gonna say, you can't do it.
Well, it seems to me that there's also some logistical issues, like you had said staggered start times. So if you're talking about bringing 770 students on that side of the road, and then how many are in our, to the other side of the road, you would definitely have to
300.
stagger. And, I mean, there's a lot of traffic in that particular area. And then, I have a younger one that's riding the high school bus, and I'm not quite sure I'd want 8th graders and kindergartners on the same
That's why you
bus,
have
and I
to
don't know
stagger
whether or not
start.
you'd have accommodation that the bus can actually fit K through 8, and then,
Yeah, that's a variable. I mean, transportation, I know some K-8 buildings, they have one cycle going through, but they're a lot smaller than the 770 kids that you would have. And, that is, like you said, it is a concern. Do you want kindergartners riding on a bus with the 8th graders? 8th graders tend to have very colorful language, so we don't want that. It's one thing, but, I mean, I've seen buildings, K-8 buildings that are smaller have just one run on the buses. Now you're talking 3 bus runs in the district as well.
So why is it that, if I may, that Auburn went through a K through 8? Was that by design? Was it a space constriction, a cost constriction?
That's how the building was just progressed through the years. I mean, it's a pretty small district. They send their kids to Pinkerton
Yeah.
for high school. So I think over the years, it was just the elementary school, and it was an elementary, it started as a K-8, and over the years, they just kept it that way. I know they had explored a middle school when I was there years ago and doing a joint with Candia, but that didn't pass the muster, so.
I guess around the table is, a lot of this has to be with what's your population and what schools you have. I mean, I remember it was expanding when I grew up, but we ended up with like a K through 3, a 4 through 6, then a 7 through 9, and then a high school that was 10 through 12. So am I close to anybody? Was everybody in a one-house school and everybody, I think it
That's what I
changes.
had in mind.
What about, back to the elementary school, so we just talked about a K through 8, but back to the K through 6, if we can for a minute, is that an easier do operationally and managerial-wise and for the kids? There's less of a spread in the age,
The only thing I would be concerned with the K through 6 would be getting down to the kind of special classes, like the gyms and the art and the PE, because right now, my teachers who are doing that are booked through the day. Because they're picking up the kindergarten through 5th grade, so now you're gonna try to add one more grade level in. That would be an issue that pops into the top.
So you have a staffing problem?
Well, you would hopefully inherit some sixth grade.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Would
had
you-
the 6th grade, I would
Right.
imagine you're bringing down those 6th grade teachers from the
Right.
junior, senior high, so the staffing in terms of classroom and special ed, you would want to make sure you have a case manager down for the 6th grade. I believe those are all in place already, so you're just transporting people down, but I think the only issue I can see, like I said, right now would be the
Art, music, and gym.
art, music, gym, computers,
Right.
that sort of thing.
So what you're saying is the current configuration actually does work fairly well.
Yes,
K through 5, and then 6 through 12.
speaking for K through 5, I would
Okay,
say
yeah,
it works
right.
very well. I think 6 through 12, I think it works. You know, I'm not in the building every day, so I can't give you
Yeah, no, that's
a
fair,
honest
that's fair.
But, you know,
honest
just
assessment.
to throw, I thought when we were here at the last meeting, at one time it came up that K through 6 is ideal.
Right.
I mean, those words were, I mean, I don't
I
want to
mean,
put down
yeah.
spot-
I think it wasn't so much that they're ideal, but in terms of, if we're gonna move something, if we're moving a grade around.
Yeah,
that's
that-
sixth grade.
That the
Right.
preference of the two
That's fair.
principals was to move 6 down. If we had to move a grade level, to 6 down would be better than moving 5 up.
Yeah.
All right.
K through 6 is about 600 students, which
Right.
is,
Yeah, and I think, Dan, it also came from an educational point of view, God forbid we speak about educational point of view, when we're talking about, is that grouping of age. There was still a pretty decent shift from 6th to 7th to 9th type of thing.
Right.
And it sounded like, gee, if I had to design this from scratch, I'd have the dividing line at between 6th and 7th, whether you had 4 schools, 3 schools, or 2 schools, you'd sort of draw that line. I think you're speaking to space and being able to envision that you can fit
Right.
2 stories and the extra teachers in that space and not have a parking problem and still have place for kids to
Right,
run around.
right. If you could acquire more land.
You know, if we
Right.
could acquire more land,
Well-
and you did bring 6, and you had your parking space,
exactly.
I mean,
It got a pretty good situation in my estimation. I sit here and I look at it and I say, from what we've talked about tonight, just to capsulize a little bit, the elementary schools seem to have the fewest number of issues as the conversation went. So if you could deal with that in either K through 5 or K through 6, and deal with the renovation of the junior, senior high school, and utilize the property across the street for a relief valve, which is really what it was when it was purchased, and those are just my words. It gave us a little breathing room. And if you think about what we spent for it, as opposed to what we could spend in new construction and ongoing maintenance of buildings and everything else over, a 25 or 50-year life cycle, because those are the two numbers that we're looking at. We're probably, if we're talking about renovations, we're probably talking about a 25-year cycle. So it seems to me that having that little relief valve across the street at the Carpenter property for fields and/or parking, but not necessarily taking students across that road all the time, which is a concern for me, no matter how it's done. I think it's an expensive thing to do. I think the tunnel's the right way to do it, but it's pretty expensive. And I think it's the safest way to do it. But I just think it's an issue, so I think, just trying to put tonight in perspective, I just think that we need to concentrate on the elementary school and maybe try to find a little more property there for some parking, because if there's any pavement, there's a car parked next to it. It doesn't matter where it is around that building. So that's an exciting place to get a parking spot.
Did someone mention that there was a property that abuts that was for sale?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know where that property
Yeah.
is?
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
Do you want to point it out?
It's, this house, and these are outbuildings, that's a barn. This isn't a house, but this is a barn, I think it belongs to this. East State, it goes back here, and you got a brook back here, so there are wetlands back here.
That's Moonlight Brook, isn't it?
But this is upland right here, it's dry, but it goes downhill here into this, to kind of a.
How many acres is that, Mike?
wet area. I think I had it as 2 and something, or just under 2.
It's nice.
Yeah, but
So it's-
terrain-wise, it goes high and then low down to a brook and then raises up for the elementary school.
Yeah, and
May have the space, but not the ideal.
again, I think it's like, like right in here is the high area, then I believe it goes
Moonlight
down
Brook
into
sounds like
here,
a potential
wet area. But this,
Oh, it is.
this is the one for sale right now, so.
And it's a long lot that goes all the way back and it
Yeah.
parallel, comes right up behind the play area.
I mean, it abuts, there's a old stone wall right here that you can see, but yes, it does abut, so there's no property. This property, like runs here. So this, this directly abuts the school property.
There's some room for growth, potentially.
Yeah, it's an open field.
Finding out the limits of the Carpenter property and what could be built there and the wetlands issues, I think, is important. Because if that can't solve everything by building a new campus there for the sake of argument, and much less, that, at least from the conversation tonight, didn't sound like, let's have a third location.
Right.
So, whether you build something new there, keep the high school and get rid of the elementary school property, or whether you keep the 2 that you have, seem to be, 2 is more rational than 3, especially if the Carpenter property can't support a huge building.
Just, it seems like, there are an infinite number of ways to solve this, The 3-building idea, just, it strikes me as unworkable for a small town. I mean, 3-school idea.
Yeah.
However, and this is just conceptual, I don't know if it makes any sense, we're sort of at the conceptual stage, that, I understand in your meetings that there was expressed, that, I don't know, somebody expressed that a auditorium would be nice, I don't know if that's a need or a want. We have the stage area in here now, and I don't know if the right configuration, whether that could be expanded into an auditorium, but if not, could just a, auditorium or, go there versus an entire building with staff and,
Sure.
Whatnot.
Right.
Lincoln Center concept.
Exactly. And in that event, saw Shia Madness there a couple months ago. You'd have this extra space here from the stage that you wouldn't really need anymore. Maybe it's a band area now or whatever, versus it being sort of the auditorium
Right.
as it is. I mean, the auditorium, it's not really an auditorium, it's like this, it's just sort of one-level seating, if you, so.
Well, it seems we were talking about, last time we met, we were talking about dual use for community use as well as school use. You could think about putting a building across that had maybe SAU, the auditorium, and then you have the field, so that you would have people able to run tracks, and, maybe there are some places where,
Yeah.
You think about space that works for the community as well as for the school.
Precisely.
That takes some
Yeah.
pressure off the junior, senior high, and that adds some great value to the community.
Absolutely.
Right.
Didn't we see that up at Kingswood? Isn't that what they had? They had, their auditorium was like the Lincoln, the Kennedy Center. It was huge, but the concept was that was a standalone building. It abutted the field, so the back end of it was used as the field house.
No, they had classrooms around it.
Did they have,
It
they had
was
art
like right in
classrooms?
it was right in the center of that big standalone building.
Right.
With the fields out back.
But
It was spectacular.
it was spectacular. It's huge. I mean, but they're a huge district, but it's kind of like along the lines of what I just mentioned. You had, this, in your first drawing, you had this little concession area here. That's something that sort of could be combined into
Yeah.
one. and, and a field house, and,
Right.
fields can be, I suppose, under that configuration, built at any time, right, if the community wants them,
So you could have a concession area that could be used for the auditorium,
Good.
as well as the fields, a ticket booth for the auditorium as well, so you can have this kind of
Precisely,
really
yeah.
interesting.
And what just makes, this sort of gets my lights turning on that one, is just the area you would free up, potentially with that stage area in the high school itself to be used for something else,
So
whether
Mike,
it's.
you're not to interrupt, so you're basically looking for some sort of auditorium,
Mm.
square footage, seating to be determined, some sort of field house or additional indoor rec area, and also the offices for the administration.
And the town, I understand.
It still ends up being a third, I get back to, we're 9,000 people, besides the fact we have 15% come out to vote. Auditoriums, general meeting places, it sounds great, but with the road infrastructure, with the schools, with the water system and everything that we have, I'm not saying we can't use the space, obviously parking and all that, but we seem to be adding on to, gee, let's be great, an arts center of some type, and let's get the school administration, and let's have fields move over there, and then we have wetlands, and again, I get back to the point of how much can you put over in that space.
But I think our next step is to bring back 4 more options. So that's just one of the options, and then we start getting the advantage, disadvantages of each, and start getting costs at some point, not our next meeting, but soon. And that's how you're going to weigh them out and bring them to a public forum so that you can hear from the general public on how important the
Well,
auditorium is.
no matter where we went in our visits to the various properties, the various schools, if not the first, the second thing that we heard was, the most important thing that we dealt with here was community involvement and a space that the community can use. We heard about it in every single place that we went, and we saw it. And speaking for myself, I've always been a proponent of an auditorium. I think that in terms of total education, it's a very important thing. And, the arts and things of that nature are going by the wayside these days in education, and it's a shame. So, we've been at this since 2005 or 2004. I gave Mike a couple of emails tonight from 2004. And we've talked about a lot of numbers and a lot of different things, but I don't know, I think if you take a tack to that, which is what I said a few moments ago, that the Carpenter property is maybe our little relief valve, or it gives us our ability to think outside of the box a little bit, which is what Mike's suggestion certainly was. I think it's really something to pursue and not treat lightly. So,
Because I don't want to go on and on, but under that sort of scenario, again, this is just conceptual, we're not promoting anything, we're just, these are options. I mean, you could sell it, you could probably, if the district deemed prudent, they could sell a bigger chunk back.
yeah, and
know.
the Carpenter property, the biggest thing it did for us, in my opinion, is it kept our school downtown, okay? A walkable school, both for the elementary school and the junior, senior high school. So, and the previous proposal was probably a little out there and a little overboard, but that land is still there. And if you think about, again, what we paid for it as compared to what its really potential value is, there's no comparison. It was really a steal if you think about the potential value it holds and brings to the table. So, and again, we've been doing this a long time, so we might as well hash it over a little more, and that's it for me.
One of the things I just remember from our conversation, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was remembering that dual use can also bring revenue, right? So, having an auditorium can be a revenue generating. It's something that you can rent out. It can go back into the coffers.
Kingswood is booked for 2 years was it
Kingswood
Kingswood?
in Hanover, right? Hanover,
Yeah, it
Hanover.
booked for like 2 years ahead. Just amazing. I mean, you can't get a spot for 2 years. I couldn't
College
believe it,
town,
you know?
Hanover.
Well, yeah, in Dartmouth, right, yeah, so that's a different, but who knows? I mean,
Mhm.
we're looking at.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised at how often people are clamoring for space and to rent a space, and they're willing to pay, regardless of the size of the town, so, Yeah.
Various dance schools that need space for
yeah.
Right, but if you're
That's
looking,
that
if
sort of thing.
you
Yeah.
talk, with Skip, and what you're saying is if you're looking at as common space for an auditorium, not school space, and maybe there's something with ball fields or not ball fields, you potentially solve you don't have a lot of traffic during the day between the facilities, because people would only be going to the
Right.
auditorium or sports field when they needed to.
There are plenty of overflow parking under the right conditions.
You're
across
still
the-
talking about a third building, but you're not talking about one that has to be maintained with a huge staff. You don't have cafeteria, you don't have classrooms, you don't have that. So that would just be a build type of thing. I like your thought, that the constraints that just say how much can you build there. It seems most of us are saying 3 buildings seems to be more expensive than 2, no matter how efficient you get. This may be the one that relieves some space.
Well, and you can structure it in a
Get
time,
parking.
in time, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but you can structure it out in time, but you know where you're going, or have an idea of where you're going financially and down the road in the future, so. I just think it just gives us all kinds of possibilities, but I think,
In terms of running utilities for a space like that, I don't know whether you know this off the top of your head, but a question I would have, thinking about that kind of modeling, was, you had said, for locker rooms and in concessions.
big house.
You could, yes, but would you have to run these utilities, and if you had?
It would be a lot less expensive than a big 100,000 square foot facility. So an auditorium and a concession and some bathrooms, probably. I'm just trying to think.
You're going to make it
Well, and
Branford,
an
Missouri with
SAU
Klieg
office, too.
lights.
And the SAU, but they don't have much space. It's,
sorry,
it would be tens of thousands, it wouldn't be hundreds, so, it's a sliding scale.
Ingrid, have you seen I'm thinking along the lines of school and community use, along the same theme. Have you seen a combination auditorium gym, other than this sort of
We
setup
have,
here?
yes, yep,
You could,
yep.
If you were to do a proposal like what you're talking about, or what's been discussed, you would alleviate the problems that you run into when you're attending an event at the elementary school, because you could shift all of the big events to that one facility. So, even at the high school, when they do the jump rope things, I hear that it's packed and everything else. If you had something available across the street with parking on site, and you've still got the additional parking at the school, and then you're not worried about building a large auditorium or any type of an auditorium in either one of those
right.
buildings that you've got, so you're utilizing it for classrooms. To me, that sounds like, and you've got it available for the vote, when the town votes. You could use that facility for voting day, where there'd be plenty of parking, not have to worry, there's just all kinds of
Get rid of the
potential
SAU.
opportunities by doing something like that at a minimal cost, as opposed to putting a school building there.
And if
How
you
many
add in the
parking
fact you don't have the
spots do you-
kindergartners going through the high school to get to the auditorium, you separate them.
I think that we had 100 over here.
Yeah, about
100-ish.
100, 120.
So what I was just thinking, an auditorium plus concession building would be about that big, so you could actually fit in a soccer field here too. So you could have the 3 fields, and maybe this is in the future as well, but you leave space for, maybe you just do the concession and bathrooms first, but then you add on to it later. We have to look at the cost and the phasing on when you want to do it, but really you could still keep the parking have that building here, and then have the 3 fields without majorly impacting the wetlands.
Because that'll be expensive.
Well, that, and we were talking, you separate the two populations as well, by having a common space that they can share, but at different times, so you're not having high school kids going to the elementary school, or elementary kids having to travel to high school for a presentation or something.
And so to me, in this, you know, what, along the lines of what we were talking about, if you move the 6th grade down here, you do sort of free up the space. It seems like this property becomes ever more
Yes,
potentially valuable,
yes.
useful.
Note that as an action item for next time. We need to figure out, it's important,
Right.
who's the owner, what they're looking for.
A lot of that legwork's been done. You guys already toured it, correct?
Yeah, we walked it, so,
School board has.
yeah.
So we have a lot of options to work on, which is good.
Last time we did this, we finished at number 17, I think was the preferred option.
So I think it's vitally important we find out about those wetlands and see if
Yes.
it's done any previous studies.
Yes, I'll call Brad first thing. Okay?
Okay.
Good.
That and the 2-floor stuff at the elementary school sounds like.
Right. Good. And then the other thing we had, I think, were the staffing reviews that we had at the middle high school, and I'll pass, these are the notes from that. And so these are the notes I took verbatim as we met with all of the groups. The second piece is what we're going to fold into Dr. Joyce's report we will get at the end of this week. And these are the program elements that we need to make sure that are covered, because Dr. Joyce is looking at the school in terms of education, what you do there now versus what the standards are. But this adds in the faculty comment and suggestion. So I don't know if, we probably, I don't know what time it is,
As
8
last in
o'clock.
line, I have some extra copies if somebody needs them.
If we want to go through these, or if you want to read them. We're not done talking with the faculty, because we still have administration, kitchen, and elementary.
Why don't we plan to go till 8:30? 2.5-hour meeting's probably about as long as we can all,
Sure.
at least I'll speak for myself, think, so,
Okay.
at this point in the evening, so.
So why don't we start with the second one that I printed out, because that's really kind of outlining our space needs. So the site, we went over a little bit about the separate bus drop-off at the front of the building, and they have 5 buses now. Front and rear entrance, and access to the building from the fields, because it's a safety issue now, going from the building for gym class, across parking lots, across bus, parent drop-off, so we really need to figure out how to do that safely. They want to add 50 spaces at the high school, and add visitors and ADA handicap parking. They want to add a loading dock for the kitchen and custodial storage. That's workable loading dock. They need a dumpster near the kitchen with a recycling dumpster, a generator, and the snow at the west property line leaches onto the neighbor's property.
Ingrid, on the generator, and we've seen some schools where it didn't provide the entire school, but just the vitals.
Right.
Same,
Yeah.
same idea.
Same idea here, right. The next category was athletics. So the needs were a soccer field, a baseball field. The field hockey you don't have right now, so that's really not pertinent, so we.
Can I interrupt, Nick? Are these weighted, are they ranked, or are they just randomly, is there an order of?
No, they're
needed?
just randomly.
They're just random, okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
I have a feeling javelin is not gonna, I'm surprised if they have anything beyond discus in high school. Do they? I mean, I'm sure that's.
Depends on the school.
Lots of
high
track and
school
field
and
scholarships
javelin?
out there. Lots of.
That and the need for a rather large distance to throw it safely. I used to do some of this.
Yeah.
We actually, our track team does really well, and they practice in your parking lot. They don't have a field, shot put, all that.
Right.
All that stuff in the parking lot. So imagine if they could have a track there. Just imagine.
Javelin just puts it in a different dimension with a sharp stick floating in the air.
Well, and there are lots and lots of track and field scholarships at the collegiate level, and lots, they're,
I saw that
It's
in
a
the
good-
DOE
good way to pay
manual that
college.
Nike gives grants for tracks. I
Absolutely.
don't know how much.
This wasn't
For building
that, this
tracks.
was just for paving.
In Keene, didn't they get money for that track?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they got money.
I thought there was.
And I did discus and shot put, and I also did hammer and javelin. I got, those two last ones put a lot more people
Skip,
at
did they
risk
get money
than the
for that?
first two.
I thought so,
They
yeah.
get money for that track.
Yeah, beautiful track, 6 lanes, I think.
So the lacrosse field could be shared with the soccer, and then their wish list with a future track with football field inside. Indoor athletics, health classroom was something new that we hadn't heard before. Currently, health jumps around depending upon, exactly, room availability. A training room would be nice. The weight room, because of the elevator addition, the elevator machine room has taken up some of that training room space, or the weight room space, so they really need a bigger room with better ventilation. Storage for uniforms, storage for the gym, and the locker rooms are fine, except the showers need to be renovated. The educational nurse area, she needs a private office. Everything is just a free-for-all right now. Separate waiting area, and adequate cots and number of beds. The guidance area needs a reception area, 4 offices, a office for the college people that can to utilize and share, a conference room for 10 to 12 people they don't have, and a separate record storage room. And they suggested that the behavior room, which is a specialized service, should be near the guidance, and the guidance needs to be near the nurse, so they create a whole wellness area that they can all work together in. The faculty requested a separate lunch from the workroom, or one that's big enough to accommodate both, because they're basically stepping over each other right now. It's not enough space. And we met with all the different classroom teachers, and this is a new one to us, but it made sense. The text-to-speech room, I guess there are children that come that have to use handheld devices that speak, and it's disrupting to the whole class. So they asked if in certain areas they could have these specialized rooms, 8 to 10 foot rooms that could also be used as small group instruction and little conference rooms, but the kids could go out and not disrupt the whole class. Conference room, again, that could double with the text-to-speech room. Book storage closet, and a public display with an electronic kiosk to show student work, because a lot of the displays show physical things, but the English department really wanted to show poems and things like that. Math, they only have 5 classrooms now, but they have 6 faculty. So again, some of those math teachers and other teachers teach in science rooms, and to have to set up a whole new class sometimes is not great. And they do have students that they need separate study carrels, so this is more of a furniture issue, not a space requirement. We talked about in social studies most of the same things that we had talked about the other classrooms about, but the middle school, they want a sink for each team, so not every classroom, but one for each team that they could use. The science, the high school uses the middle school science rooms because the physics teacher doesn't have a classroom, so we really need a physics classroom. The middle school science rooms don't have separate labs and classroom areas, so they would request that they have the different areas, sure.
Can I interrupt? So on the model that you added a science wing, do you know how many classrooms that frees up?
Well, it depends on what option.
How
But
many
it's
designated science classrooms are there? Do you
3 for
know?
the high school.
3 for the high school.
Yeah, I believe.
Problem is, in some of those, the classroom wing kind of to the left of the blue, some of those classrooms aren't the proper square footage. So when we were
Is there-
looking at it, we would kind of lose a few classrooms and just make them all a little bigger to make them the appropriate size. And then we recreate the science classrooms. So it's not like we move a science classroom and we get a classroom back. We're kind of taking over some of that space.
Ingrid, I'm assuming that this has not really been incorporated into the designs.
Right.
The designs tonight were just showing us
Blocks.
places where you could put additional space and fit things.
Correct.
You know, this list, which it sounds great like a wish list, has a specialty room for everybody who needs a specialty room, which I got to assume at some point we can't, the square footage is going to go up if you have every single one of these
Exactly.
specialty rooms and storerooms put there. Okay, but it's not in the plan.
Our, step one is to hear what is needed. Step two is to sit with Chris and folks and you to figure out really what our program is. So science prep room, they don't have one with, well, the high school has one right now, but they need a separate one with dishwashing, or dishwasher. The health classroom we had talked about. World language, they would like a book room. They have one French classroom, and they have they have one Spanish room, and they need an extra Spanish room.
Ingrid, can you just go back to the science prep room one more time? You said they have one?
They have one right now in between two of the science classrooms that are upstairs down that hall. And those science rooms are a very peculiar proportion. They're like long and narrow. So in any, I think, option, our sciences were moving to be the right square footage. And so that's just saying between even the middle school science classrooms, there should be a shared, rather than they each have a prep room, a shared
okay,
prep
yeah.
room, yeah. Let's see.
What is the French classrooms with with sinks?
She does a lot of cooking because French culture has a lot of cooking with it. So that was a request from her, not a necessarily need, but a want. And the Spanish instructors really didn't think they needed a sink. So if a lot of times the French instructor goes and utilizes family and consumer science, but those classes happen all the time, so she's impeding on that space, so.
Thank you.
Specialized classrooms, this is special ed, so we went through all their existing spaces and talked about how many instructors there were and the size and what they do in each and how many kids. They don't have an OT-PT room, which was a little shocking because most schools do. Occupational therapy, physical therapy is what that stands for. Speech and language room for 8 to 10 students near the guidance is needed. The reading specialist rooms where they are helping kids learn how to read, both of them are in the same room right now, and they really need separate rooms to be good. Zen dens, that's a new term, but it's kind of timeout room or de-escalation room, so we need to account for those. Multi-sensory room is the one that you converted your art room to, with a sink, changing area, and bathroom. They need 5 testing rooms for kids, and those could be dual-use, small conference as well. The life skills room was kind of a wish list, but that's a room with a kitchen and washer dryer to teach students how to, live normal lives. Transition office for 8 to 10 students. Collaborative area they have right now for 10 to 12 students, and a conference room. Storage and records room, and they really suggested air conditioning in the 3 rooms that are listed there.
But it's collaborative next to air conditioning.
That's a room, so it's called the collaborative. It's a special ed room, but they
Okay.
call it that.
So this is air conditioning just in a few rooms, not
Exactly,
throughout the
not the whole
facility?
thing, correct, yep. Facility support, IT, basically all the wiring is Cat 3, which I don't think we've ever seen at a school, so, never
Great.
heard of it.
Come on now.
So.
You have now.
Yes. This hub is the hub to all your schools too, so we need to pay attention and locate and build the new, and then decommission the old, because you have to stay up and running.
It's quicker to mail letters.
Your wireless stuff is fairly new, so we'll be able to reuse that. Toilet rooms were a huge must. Additional student toilets, additional staff toilets, separating the middle school, because right now the middle school go to the bathroom with the high school, and that's not great. Drinkable water, I guess the water quality isn't great, so having bottle fillers in the drinking fountains. And they mentioned the hallways are pretty narrow, especially in the middle school section, so to look at the lockers, how big they are, how big the halls are, and make sure we're meeting code at least.
Can
Media.
I just ask along that,
Sure.
is there ADA requirements for hallway width?
Yeah, but your hallways all meet those. It's more life safety, and if some emergency happened, if all the kids went out into do you have enough egress width?
But I know, like, now if there's someone who is in a wheelchair or on crutches or something like that, they actually can't transition classes while the students are transitioning, so they have to wait. Because the hallways,
Schools, they want 8 feet clear.
Yeah, and you have
Plus
that.
lockers, so you end up with 10-foot wide hallways is kind of the standard school.
Yeah.
You know what was interesting, just on the issue of lockers, where was it, at Claremont? They're there for antique's sake. Kids don't use them anymore.
They don't.
They bring their backpacks with them.
Backpacks.
Right.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They really,
So that maybe frees up some hall space.
Right.
I mean, is there anything that says you gotta have a locker?
No.
Or
Just-
doing pods of lockers, so you get them out of the hallway,
Right.
give them a little breakout space where kids can kind of hang out by their locker, get their stuff, and then.
Or give
Off those
lockers to
class.
the kids that want them, and don't provide one for every student,
Have a lottery?
Right. Like the parking.
dorm rooms on campus.
Media center, they want rooms within the big room so they can have breakout and team teaching. Right now, the instructors really aren't doing a lot of team teaching because there's no space for them to do it. So, science and math would teach together, art and science, and they could do a lot more programming. A possible video studio, that was on the wish list. Reading lounge, like soft seating, in a small office. And right now, how it's kind of all cut up, and it's a lot of space, so they don't need that much space, but they want a better proportion space. The computer lab, 26 computers with mobile furniture, a small work area for publishing and graphics, and a storage room. In music, they would like 3 general music classrooms, one for an 80-plus piece band with a flat floor, one for chorus, and there's a third one too. I don't have that on here. So instrument storage, that includes 20-plus guitars, drums, and piano, music storage room, an office, and 2 practice rooms. And then the chorus has 3 chorus sections. They'd like a permanently tiered floor. Also music storage lockers there, and they'd like movable risers for the stage. And then drama, they suggested, because the stage now can't fit the 80-piece band that they have, so if they were going to do a new auditorium, minimum of 350 seats, they'd like more. Dressing rooms, a control room for the lighting and sound, ticket booth, and storage. And then the art, they just have 1 classroom now, so they want an art for the high school and an art for the middle school, kiln, storage, and a dark room. The tech ed and wood shop is just tiny, tiny, tiny. I'm surprised she doesn't have more accidents because of all that equipment in there. They also want a dedicated classroom. They have one now, but it could be a bit bigger too. And family and consumer science, same thing. It's a tiny room. They do want to keep the separate classroom for, sewing and that part of the program. And it also should be near the middle school, because right now it's on the other end, because the middle schoolers use that space. And then just talking about unified art rooms for possible adult education classes, cooking classes, so to try to remember to keep an open mind and bring in the community to use the facility. So that's the big picture. This other document are literally, as they were talking, what all my notes are. So it has a lot more information. We've just extracted kind of the space needs that we'll need to work with Joyce's document. So we learned a lot. They were very positive, very helpful, hopeful. We obviously told them this is the first. We didn't have any plans to show them, so that we'd be back sometime later this fall, early winter, to run through whatever building option we may end up with, so they can
Keep that hope alive.
keep that hope alive.
Is there any, this strikes me as a want list, and it's a rather great one, rather than an absolute needs. And I just went through this, and besides seeing 15 storage areas, which I'm sure they need, don't get me wrong, but just sort of adds space in my mind. And all the specialty rooms, which between special ed and the arts and everything, which would be wonderful to have, but does this impression say you need a high school twice the size as you have today to be able to fit that in existing space?
No.
Okay. Because I'm intrigued as how much we can fit inside that.
We knew about the physics room. I think the health room, the added art room,
The band space expanded a
the
little.
band, yeah. Special ed always, when you do these projects, their needs change, so. One thing that we don't have in here are any flex rooms for possible bubble grades that you may have, so, you don't want to build too tight. When you buy a pair of pants, you don't get them too tight, you have them a little bit loose.
Well, plus you have conference rooms and then
Right.
group project rooms and
Exactly.
stuff like that. Yeah.
So, there are a few wish list items, and we've tried to identify those wish list items on here, but most of these are needs, but I think Chris should go through it once we get the program in a spreadsheet and really designate need versus want.
Ingrid, will Dr. Joyce be getting a copy of this?
We can send him one, sure.
I think
yeah.
that'd be helpful, since he's working on his,
Yep,
on his end.
sure.
Good idea.
Ingrid, did you have anything else on that, or?
That is it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for tonight? This is just the beginning, so you can digest this, and I'm sure there'll be more questions once we do.
Thanks for these things. I think you got a great discussion going.
Great.
The meeting date?
It is, yeah, that was helpful. Okay.
Do we have a next meeting date?
2 weeks from
2
tonight?
weeks, great.
2 weeks from tonight. Let's meet at, we talked about scheduling. Oh, before we leave, a few logistics things. Would 6:30 work for everybody? That's a little bit better for me, actually. I'm gonna scoot over here. But the other thing we talked about is in terms of communication with you. I mean,
I read that,
yeah, so let me throw this out here. Does it make sense for me to sort of be the point person both ways? Things feed up through me and then feed down through you, so we're not, individually peppering you with questions or
Sure.
vice versa?
That works for me.
That works?
I think by sharing, I'm fine with that. If you're going to do it by email to document it or by phone or whatever, can you share with us the compilation? Whatever we're asking you to ask them, so we can see what's going in over there. So if we have any comments or somebody else has a comment, it gives us a thought.
6:30 is what we're saying?
Yeah, 6:30.
That's on the 10th?
Yeah. And so everything, I tend to give you everything. I'm going to give you things, and I'll maybe put a note on them for your information or something, but I want everybody to be in the loop. I did that knowing, to some, Chris wasn't going to be here tonight, but I sent him everything just so he can see it at his convenience. So anything I get, you'll get. So. And it was encouraging that we did get somebody who was watching and weighed in. One person was watching at least. And
I don't know about anything. I got 3 or 4 calls with people saying they couldn't find where the meeting was initially for the first 2 weeks until it was posted.
fixed that. So, but she was secretary for many years at the elementary school, and she helped. That paid off. I mean, we have a source of information we might not have known about. So. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.